let's talk about the review of the coding challenge. So first of all, beginners, what we got today here. I'll jump straight to question number 3, which was arguably the most complicated one. Find the sexy artist. Yeah. How many arguments our function receives? 1. What's the type of the only argument our function receives? It's an array. That's correct, guys. So we got the array already prepared. So we need to find the sexy artist. We know that because every array, every property of the array, which is an object, I hope you agree on that, has a boolean called is sexy. So I want to identify the sexy one. There is only one. We can assume there is only one in this particular exercise. So return artist dot what? Fine, correct, Abdul. Artist. And then how do we know if the artist is sexy or not? Like that? No. Artist. Like that. Do we need to do that? Equal true? It's optional. You can put it, that's fine, but even if you delete it, it will work because that will return true or false. So we can simplify this a bit. Anything else? Dot name, correct. What happened, Nilofer, if we return that as it is at the moment? Correct. It will return the entire object. According to the exercise, we only care about the name of that person, not the entire object. You're right, Nilofer. So we can type dot name, something like that. Does it make sense? If you find that syntax a bit complicated, you can always create a variable, sexy artist, which is that. Yeah? And then, can you complete the exercise, please? Correct. Some people prefer that syntax. Yeah? Depends on your appetite today. But anyway, that's pretty much it. It works, confetti time. Any questions? No? Right, so let's do question number 5. It's a bit tricky. Is a variable iterable? So iterables represent a sort of new concept in modern JavaScript. Yeah. So when we talk about iterable variables, we're talking about data that can be iterated from the beginning to the end. In other words, to simplify things, something will be iterable if we can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, if we can go through the individual elements. In JavaScript, it quickly comes to our mind that arrays, of course, can be iterated, but also strings, right? So if I have let name Peter, can I do return name of 1? Does that make any sense? It does make sense. This is valid in JavaScript. That will return E. Yeah? So one of the beautifulness of JavaScript is that even though strings and arrays, they look completely different, there are some ways, in some certain aspects, they share the same API. I'm talking about that, but there are other scenarios. Have you heard about includes? You want to see if something includes something else? Includes is also part of both strings and arrays. We'll talk about that in the future. On the expert training, we are using includes all the time. For now, we want essentially to see if a variable, let's call it x, because we don't really know what x is, right? We don't have any semantics. So we want to see if x is iterable or not. So it will be iterable according to the instructions at the bottom, as you can see here, if the variable is a string or is an array. So how do we know if a variable is a string or not? Type of, correct. Return type of X, what? Equal to string, like that? Double or triple? Triple. Fantastic. Or, how do we do the or in JavaScript? Two pipes, correct. How do we check, that's the complex bit, if X is an array? Fantastic, Abdul. Array.isArray X. Easy, right? That's a new thing in JavaScript, by the way, array.isArray. In the past, it was much more complicated than to determine whether a given variable was an array or not. We don't have type of X equals array. That doesn't work in JavaScript. It's one of the oddities, one of the weird things of classic JavaScript. Anyway, that should be it, right? We got Confetti, so it's all good. Any questions? No? Fantastic. So let's leave it here, the beginners, and then let's do intermediate. Let's spend the next 50 minutes or so covering a decent bunch of questions. Ooh, question number 1, the classic intermediate one. Create an array util component. So be singular, component, not components. So we are expected to create not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 methods to manipulate arrays. Yeah? How do we want to add elements at the end of the array, to prepend elements, to delete the first and to delete the last. Yeah? Thankfully, we got the methods already prepared. So append. How many arguments append receives? 2, correct. The first one, which is the array, and then whatever, the item, the element, is what you want to add to the array. So let's try something. How do we add elements to existing arrays? Push. Array.push item. Let's try that for now. How do we prepend elements? Again, the same thing, array and item. How do we prepend elements on arrays? Unshift, correct. How do we delete the first element of an array? Correct. Array.shift. And finally, how do we delete the last element of the array? Pop. Will this work or not? Let's see what happened. Something exotic will happen in your screens now. It doesn't work. Well, first of all, array is not defined. So yeah, on the delete last, I forgot to put the argument. Let's ignore that problem. It doesn't work, but look at the errors. Oops, you return free? Free? Huh? Free? What? What's that? What the hell? I'm not returning any number. Does anyone know why these weird numbers are returned from our algorithms?
Because array.push mutates the array, returns the length of the array.
Correct. Today, there are millions of JavaScript developers. There is many people looking after standards. That's why modern APIs are beautiful, well thought, and all these things. These methods are very old. There wasn't millions of developers on JavaScript at that time, and that means that weird decisions, controversial decisions were taken in the 90s. This is probably one of them. So push, unshift, all these methods, they return the length of the array. That's a bit weird, right? Why you want to get the length? Why do you want it to return the length of the array? It's a bit controversial. Because of that, we cannot return it like that. We have to, first of all, perform the operation, whatever it is, and then return the array. You see? First of all, change the size of the array, do whatever you need to do with it, and then return the array. Don't return it at the time that you perform the operation. It won't work. What do you think? Will it work? We'll see. We'll see. Almost. Interestingly, I think the approach works. However, one of the scenarios is still wrong. Look at what happened here. Donald Kim, empty array, you return Donald Kim, empty array. So we are pushing an empty array to our list of elements. However, according to this expectation, if what we got is an empty array, we shouldn't add it at all. Yeah? So to control that, I'll give you two alternatives. The first one is, first of all, check if there is anything, if the item has any length. If there is anything in here, then push it. If not, just return whatever you had before. 4 minutes ago, we talked that strings and arrays, because they are both iterables, they share some APIs. Length is a good example. You can get the length of an array, but you can also get the length of a string. That's why this pattern will work regardless of whether append receives an array or a string. It will work in both scenarios. If we pass an empty string, it won't be added to the array. So that should work, as you can see. I'll show you an alternative, and I'll hijack the alternative with a classic job interview question. What? This is splice? Yeah, okay, so that was a third option, splice. Have we done any works about the splice yet? Not really, right? I think it's on the calendar for next week or week after. We'll talk about the splice in the future, something easier than a splice. In modern JavaScript, we got something called concat. Yeah? Concat is equivalent, with quotes, to push, because it adds an element at the end of the array. It has a couple of differences, however. Difference number one is concat returns the new array. So you can do that, return array.concat. The second difference is concat is a pure function. We'll learn the differences between pure and impure functions. But the way it works for now is it doesn't modify the original array. So array remains untouched. It creates a copy, a new array, yeah, and it returns that copy. The last difference between push and concat is that concat is smart enough to realize that if you're trying to add something empty, could be an empty string or an empty array, it does nothing. Yeah? That's why we don't need any if-else weird thingy. We can simply return array.concat. If we try again, it works. So concat is like the modern version of push. And it works better in the majority of these scenarios, I believe. Once you start applying to a senior position, the question could be, is there any advantage of using push instead of concat? Because concat looks much more powerful, right? But is there any scenario where you may want to use push? Yes. Because concat is more sophisticated, it checks whether you have something on the item or not. There is some complexity. It's slower. Yeah? So it's less performant. If you want to add a list of 10 fruits, apple, orange, banana, there is no difference. But if you want to deal with a 10 million element array, could make a big impact. Yeah? So it's worth to know that concat is less performant than push. Anything else? No? All right, so let me have a look to the code that you wrote. So you can see a nice trying to use a splice, which is fine. But
I actually used all of those methods that you just listed.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was always getting
Yeah.
one that didn't work.
Okay, cool. I hope now this problem is going to clarify. So you see, for instance, Vincent using Concat. What else? Richard. Interesting. So Richard is doing something different, right? So I find Richard's solution a bit controversial because essentially Richard said, if I got an array, don't do anything. But what happened, Richard, if you got an array of things, array of fruits, you are not adding them, right? So that could be a bit controversial. And then that's it, right? That's pretty much it. So, question number 2. Get sorted array. This is one of the easiest questions on the intermediate program. So let's assume we have an array. Let's assume that. If we have an array, how do we sort the array? Does anyone know how to sort an array? Sort. Correct. Array.sort. That's the way it will work if we will have received an array. Unfortunately, we don't receive an array. How many arguments do we receive?
3, 4, 1. Sorry, no, arguments. 3, 4, and 1.
3, 4, and 1. In other words, we don't really know. We may receive 45 arguments. We don't know. Because we don't know, we need to find a way to collect them all, to pick them all. How do we do that, guys, in modern JavaScript? Correct, with the REST operator. So with the REST operator, we can gather an unlimited list of arguments. In other words, if here we put ... array, we are essentially creating an array with as many elements as arguments our function receives, regardless of whether it's 3, 4, 1, or 3 million. It will collect them all. And based on that, because we already have an array, sort, easy peasy, right? So that should work, as you can see. I'll tell you something. I'm not a big fan of this API. Sort can work like that without any arguments. But what happens if, for instance, we are asked to sort the array in descending order, meaning the highest number will go first and the lowest number will go last? How do we change the sorting criteria? Ooh, nice. Reverse. Fair enough. Yes, fair enough. Yeah, I didn't thought about that, but yes, if you use reverse, it works. But let's try to solve the problem simply using sort. I don't want to add another method using sort. With sort, we can pass a callback functions, similarly to find, filter, map, reduce, all these things. And that callback function will receive 2 arguments. Item 1, item 2. The syntax is a bit tricky. So the way this works is we are essentially going to compare every single pair of elements in our array to determine the order. And now look at the syntax. Here we return something. If we return, let me add a comment because that's a bit weird. If we return a negative value, could be -1 or -1 million, sort ascending. If we return a positive value, sort descending. What that means? That means that the classic approach is to do, if we are talking about numbers, of course, which is the case, item 1 minus item 2. If item 1 is smaller than item 2, if we got 1 and 7, that will return a negative value, right? Because 1 minus 7 is -6, in which case 1 will be displayed before 7. So if we try that, it will still work, as you can see. But now, if we change the algorithm to item 2 minus item 1, the array will be arranged in a descending order. Because if number 2 is 7, and number 1 and item 1 is 1, 7 minus 1 is 6, is a positive number, yeah, in which case it will essentially put item 2 before item 1. Yeah? It takes a while to get used to the syntax, but this is pretty much it. In other words, if we try again, it will fail, obviously, but I hope you can see that the sorting criteria is satisfied. You see, highest number first, lowest number at the end. And also works with negatives ones, of course. Any questions? No? Cool, so let me check your code. Question number 2. You see, Vincent is literally following the same pattern. Just a small concern about readability. I like that argument name, numbers, because you're clearly specifying, you're telling your colleagues that you have a list of numbers. Fantastic, I love it. But then here, A and B, I'm not a big fan of that. In my opinion, I will rename these to number A and number B, or number 1 and number 2, something a bit more meaningful. But all good apart from that. For Anais, so you approach it in the most simplistic way, right? Using sort, and that's it. Again, the only way where we can use sort without any arguments is where we are dealing with basic data, like array of numbers. As soon as we're dealing with more complex data structure, it won't work. We'll need to use the callback function as Vincent proposed here. And finally, Richard. Yeah, probably Richard really knows what I'm going to say next. Readability. NS. What NS means. Yeah, you know that. You know that, but I don't know that, right? We should call for the people. I'll tell you something. Every software company in the world has at least 2 developers, you and you after 6 months. Even if you believe like NS is a good number today, maybe in 6 months you may not remember, unless you use that all the time, you may not remember what NS means, right? So let's try to create as much readable code as possible. Yeah, so that was pretty much it. Question number 3. Oh, get the palindromes. Palindromes or palindromes? Okay, say it again? Palindromes. Okay, let's get the palindromes. That's one of the most complicated questions on intermediate. But I love it, it's beautiful. It's beautiful because you need to think about out of the box, different data structures, create maybe some functions. It's a really good question, although it's not the simplest one, of course. So let's first of all try to understand the problem. So we have an array of strings. Could be words, could be sentences, we don't know, text. And then we want to find the palindrome. So palindrome is a piece of text that is the same regardless of whether you read it left to right or right to left. So for instance, Codery, is it a palindrome? No, because left to right is KOD, but right to left is IRI. It's not the same. But look at the last one. A Santa at NASA. ASAN, ASAN. Yeah, so that's a palindrome. If it wasn't complicated enough, there are a couple of things we should look after. First of all, case. We should ignore the case, as you can see here. Capital A versus lower a, still considered a palindrome. And also spaces. We should ignore the spaces. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a palindrome, right? Cool. So that's the problem. That's the problem. Then on the right-hand side, we have a list of strings. I don't want to be very descriptive because I have no idea about the domain of the problem. So we want to return a list of palindromes. And when I mean a list, I mean that there could be more than one, potentially speaking, like on the third example, You see, we got 2 palindromes. So the first thing we should look after is the looping structure. Strings dot what? I want to iterate. I want to keep, to find, to identify the palindromes. Split. Split, no. Split only works with the strings. We have an array. So I want essentially to do something, dot something, we'll see. And then after that, I want to join, I want to concatenate the results using comma space. As you can see, I'm not following a chronological order. To me, that's one of the keys to succeed working with complex scenarios. I never try to go from top to bottom. I'm first of all trying to create the skeleton, the structure, and then I look after the details. So let's assume that after doing something, we managed to get a subset. Yeah, instead of an array of 3 elements, at the end we managed to get an array of 2 elements. How do we concatenate them? Join, that's correct, Richard. Once you have an array, for instance, apple and banana, if the message you want to build is apple, comma, banana, yeah, the way to do that is using array.join, and here you specify the glue. How do you want to join the elements? Comma and space. You can put whatever you want here, right? So what happens if I want to join with an underscore? The same thing, join underscore. If I want to put hello, space, hello, space, hello, space, the same thing. So you can put whatever you want, right? So join helps to convert, transform from arrays to strings. And that's why now, dot join what? I'll show you the expectation. Comma space, that's correct. You see, that's one element of the array, that's another element of the array. Look at the way we're expected to join them. Comma space. All right, join, comma space. And now, again, back to the chicken. The complexity of the exercise sits here on line number 3. Something. What should we put here? If you want to get, you have an array and you want to get a subset of the array. Filter. Can we use find? No, why not? Correct. Fantastic. You may be tempted to use find, right? Because looking at the first example, there is just only one. But find, remember that stops as soon as the first element is found. We don't want to stop on the first element. We want to go until the end of the array and give me all the palindromes, right? Because of that, we need to do filter. And then filter what? Well, we got a string. And then remember here we have the condition specifying whether the string is a palindrome or not. I could write it inline here, but I like you to get used to create external functions, because otherwise, especially on Expert, your code will be easily hard to maintain. So the functions, the shorter, the better. Thanks because of that, and also with the idea in mind of improving readability, I'm going to create a function called isPalindrome. Right? So now I can, at the bottom, create a function isPalindrome that receives a string, and essentially you see how are we narrowing the issue. Now all the complexity is on determining whether a given string is a palindrome or not. So let's try to first get the reverse version of the string. So in other words, I create a variable reverse string equals, we'll see, And then, essentially, we'll return string equals reverse string. So if a string is the same as the reverse version, that will be a palindrome. If not, it will return false. It won't be a palindrome. And now the problem is here. We keep narrowing the problem. How do we reverse a string? In other words, if we got hello, I want to return O-L-L-E-H. O, not P. If you remember, the first week we said that the most powerful data structure in JavaScript is the array. Because if you have an array, you can do many things with it. Abdul before suggested to use reverse, you remember? To flip the elements of the array. So look at my plan. I'm going to try to transform my string hello into an array of individual characters H, E, L, L, O, because once I got the array, I can easily reverse it, and then I can join it again. Yeah, that's my idea. That's my idea. So, string. How do we transform a string into an array? Split, correct. And what do we pass here as the argument? Single quotes, that's correct. So this is like the knife that goes on the chicken. You decide how do you want to chop, how do you want to split that string. What happens, for instance, if I got hello and I split it? Tell me, if I do string dot split E, what will be the resulting array? So how many elements we got, Abdul?
The hello there.
Hello, like that?
Yeah, so it should have like an E after every letter.
I'm not following you, Abdul. So tell me the value of the first item of the array. E.
No, A and E.
A, you mean
A. The first, I'm sorry,
H.
H and E.
H and E, okay.
And then comma, then that will be E and E.
E,
And E.
L.
No, E, yeah.
E or H?
No, E, because you're,
E, like that.
yeah, because you're splitting it and you're not splitting it with,
Okay, so let's do something. Let's give you some points on the board challenge. So that's Abdul. Patrick, what do you think?
I think the first one would be HE, then
H-E, then E-E,
then LE,
L-E,
yeah, that's what I was trying to explain.
LE, and then OE.
O-E.
No, second LE before the OE.
Second L-E before, okay. Right, nice. Nilofer. Same as? Okay, so a nice Nilofer. No, you cannot change my mind. Does Gray allow you to change your mind? No, you shouldn't. No, you cannot change your mind. So then we got Vincent. And finally we got Richard.
Shouldn't it be H and L, O?
Yeah. So you want to split it with the E, you specify what you want to split it. That's why I went to change my mind.
Richard is absolutely right, and he gets 1.5 points on the board challenge. Right? He doesn't need them, right? But anyway, he's right. Why he's right? Because using a split, whatever you pass here, that's the knife. That will be destroyed. Yeah. So if you pass an E, that will be removed, and the gap in between. So that will be like the hole, a big line, and anything on the left will be an element of the array. Anything on the right will be another element of the array. Yeah, that's pretty much the way it works. What yeah.
So what's that word you used again? You said when you split
Yeah.
the value that you put in, you use one word. You know, in join, you say like what you used to.
The clue. Well, when we join, that's the clue. That's the opposite to the clue, right? I don't know how to explain that.
No, you use one word like 10 minutes ago.
I need to check the video. It's recorded.
No, you use one word like in join, you said that's like glue, you specify.
The knife, maybe.
The knife.
The knife, because you remove that character, right? So that's what if you pass E. But now the question is, what happens if you pass an empty string, as Richard originally suggested?
Just separates all of the string into single, well, it would be like H as the first value, E as the second.
Yeah. So Patrick is absolutely right. So if you pass an empty string, it will create an array of individual elements. Does it make sense? This is pretty convenient where you want to manipulate each character individually, for instance, to transform to uppercase, to do weird things. Yeah. So now we got an array in that case of 5 elements, so we can do whatever we want with them. So in here, string.split empty array will create an array of individual characters. So then we can use reverse to flip it. Yeah. So the first character will become the last, and vice versa. What do you think, guys? Is that complete? Is there anything else? To join. Fantastic. 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 That's fantastic, Anais. So we got an array, but we want to compare strings. Join. Using what? What do we put in the parentheses? Single quotes again. Correct. Now the glue is nothing. We don't want to add any underscore or any space. We just want to join them all. You can see that split and join, they are opposite. Split transforms a string into an array. Join transforms an array into a string. The only reason why we need to do that, which seems a bit silly, is because we feel very comfortable dealing with arrays. So we transform something into an array and we revert it back to its original data structure at the end. Anything else? No means this will work. All right, let's try it. Ooh, not yet.
Oh, we need to remove the spaces.
Spaces.
So we use space in
Interesting. How do we remove spaces from a string? Replace. That's very interesting. How do we use replace? Yeah, so once we got a string, look, I want to remove all the empty spaces, right? On both my string and in both sides, right? I want to get rid of all the spaces. So to do that, we can do dot replace, and then, first of all, what do you want to find? That's the first argument. And then, what's the new value? Every time you find an empty space, replace it with nothing. Simply delete it, essentially. And we obviously need to do the same thing on the right-hand side. Like that. Is it correct now? Maybe? Let's try. Let's see what happens. Ooh, still not working. Why? Say it again.
Return.
It's not return.
You need to.
Well, first of all, Nilofer spotted something very interesting, and she gets a point on the board challenge. I forgot to return anything, right? So it doesn't matter how sexy my algorithm was, it will never work, right? Thank you, Nilofer. 1 point for you. But let's say, maybe it works now, right? Let's see. It doesn't work. Doesn't work yet. Cool. Why it doesn't work? The casing, correct. We should ignore capitals and stuff like that, right? How do we deal with that? Well, of course you can use a real expression. Can you think about something simpler than a real expression? To what, Vincent? To lowercase, correct. In JavaScript, there are two related methods. Say if I got hello with capital H, that's a string, you can do string dot to lowercase, that will generate hello. Likewise, if you got hello and you do string dot to uppercase, it will return hello. These two string methods are very old, common, and useful. So we essentially need to transform. Doesn't matter if we transform anything to uppercase, to capitals, or to lower. Is there any difference? Not really. It doesn't matter. So if, for instance, if we got hello versus hello, and we want to see if they are the same, it doesn't matter if we compare hello versus hello or hello versus hello. It doesn't matter, right? The important thing is to apply the same algorithm in both sides, in the original string and in the reverse string. So let's use, for instance, to lowercase. To lowercase. Do we need to apply it in both sides? Here as well? On the reverse string? Yes, we need to apply it in both sides. We want to normalize it. What do you think? Will it work or not? You can see that line number 9, is a bit of nightmare already, right? It's very long. But we'll work on that in a minute. Let's see if it works. Right, it doesn't work. It doesn't work yet. What's the problem? I got an idea. I think the problem is here. And to prove my theory, this is just a theory, I'd like to do something. I'd like to create a new snippet to see if I'm right or am I wrong. In that snippet, I would like to just do a bit of basic coding. For instance, if I have a variable, let string equals hello world, what happens if I display string.replace? This is what we did, right? Something like that. That should return hello world altogether. Yeah, makes sense? That's the theory. And as you can see at the bottom, it works. So that's correct. However, what happened if instead of hello world, I got hello codery world? I'm expecting that to return hello codery world. Let's see if that's true or not. Oh. What happened?
Let's only list the first instance of it.
That's correct. Replace only replaces the first instance of the argument, of the first argument, which is very inconvenient because, unfortunately, in our example, as you can see, we got multiple spaces. So we cannot do that. Does anyone has any idea about how to solve the problem? There are two options. I can quickly think about. First of all is transforming the string into a split, and then using filter, remove the spaces. Right? We can do that, right? We can use string, split, blah, blah. Or we can use a regex, as Vincent suggested. Let's use regex, actually, which is part of the, I think, intermediate training. Yeah, probably. A regular expression has nothing to do with JavaScript. That's a global pattern in software development where you specify something, you specify a condition, and then you can operate on top of that condition. So the way we create a regex is with two slashes. And then inside, you specify your condition. So what are we looking for? Space. That's it. That's a regex. That's a regex that will find all the empty spaces in our string. And obviously, we need to do that, the same thing on the right-hand side. Slash, space, slash. Unfortunately, that won't work yet neither. Let's go back to our snippet and let's do the same thing. That's the code I just wrote, right? Let's run it. You see, still fails. Why? Say it again? Correct. So regex by default again stops after finding the matching element once. Because we don't want to stop there, we want to go until the end of the array. We can pass a flag here. That means don't stop. Go until the end of the list. And now you can see it works. Yeah? Cool, fantastic. So then we simply need to do the same thing, putting Y on the left and Y on the right. Let's see if it works now. It finally works, right? So again, this question is maybe the most complicated one on the intermediate training. However, I'm not satisfied yet. I'm not happy because of two things. First of all, line number 9 is huge, it's hard to read, and then we are repeating the same actions twice, right? Look, string replace to lowercase, string replace to lowercase. That's considered an anti-pattern. Don't repeat the same code multiple times. If you have to solve the same problem 2, 3, n times, then it's considered a good practice to create a function to abstract that complexity. So I'm going to create a function called, I don't know, simplify string or normalize string, something like that. It will receive a string, and that function will essentially do all these things. Only once, right? So now I can, well, you should tell me, I'm not going to do that, you'll tell me how to complete the exercise. Anyone apart from Richard? Two points. Yeah.
String, return
String.
dot,
Dot. Replace.
the regex one, so replace this, that's it, and then after that, two lowercase.
But then you are copying the same code again, right? Right. Who else? Too late. Abdul. We have a function here that encapsulates all the complexity of our algorithm, so we need to deal with it. How do we deal with that function? Nilofer. Say it again? Re- return normalized string, and then what? That's it? And happy face? No. Parentheses? And then what? What? Reverse string? Say it again? Semicolon. So that's Nilofer and a nice proposal.
So can I ask you, what's this function meant to do?
Well, you should tell me. So the function takes a string, removes the spaces, and transforms it to lowercase.
Yeah.
Because this is literally what the instruction said. Please ignore casing and spaces. Okay? So we're trying to match with that requirement. So I'm trying to normalize the string and the reverse version so I can easily compare them. Right, so that's not correct, Nilofer and Anaïs, because you're ignoring the original string. You're not comparing with anything. So, wait, not yet, Vincent. Patrick, do you have any suggestion?
I mean, I'm not fully confident with it, but I'm thinking of something.
Yeah, go for it.
Is it return normalized string as it's got there, but then the triple equals with normalized string, but then string within the parentheses.
Like that?
Yeah.
What do you think, guys? So Vincent disagrees. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, right? Let's propose a few things. So this is Patrick. So Vincent, why are you convinced Patrick is wrong? Tell me. So bonus for Patrick, right? Vincent agrees. Richard, what do you think? So Patrick is essentially right. You got 2 points. Fantastic. Now, to me, this code is way more beautiful because we see, A, please remove spaces, convert to lowercase, all these things with a string. Do the same thing with the opposite, and then check if they match or not, right? So that's the same code we wrote before, but I hope you agree this is more elegant because it's easier to read. If we change the algorithm, we have to do it only once, not twice, you know, all these things, right? So now, if that works, there are 2 points for Patrick. It works. Fantastic, Patrick. Cool, well done. Anything else? No, that question again was one of the most complicated ones, but I strongly recommend you to go to training, try to solve it by yourself, all the things. Back to the code you wrote. So Vincent, so he look at so look at the way he reversed the string. It's the same thing we did, but he created pretty much anything, string normalizer, right? Which is pretty much doing the same thing. Cool, nice. You can check that code afterwards, right? So feel free to catch up if you're curious about how your colleagues solve a particular problem. Richard is something completely different. Yeah, that's a bit obscure, right? I'm going to ignore it. It will be a bit confusing to everyone. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's valuable. My only concern is the cost, because look at how many times you need to loop, right? Filter, then inside, filter again, but then map, and then every, right? Right? Cool, but anyway, it's good, of course. We got 5 minutes. Do you want to do one more question? Yes? Question number 4 maybe, or 5? Which one do you prefer? So question number 3, how many capitals? And question number 5 is, are consecutive numbers? This is a bit more complicated, I believe. But anyway, do you have any preference? If second, that one are consecutive numbers. Yeah. All right. Yes. Sorry. Let me do the 4th one because the algorithm is the same, but this is a bit more complicated. And if people struggle with the 4, they will struggle even more with the 5th. So more than happy to do the 5th one in the next revision. So the reason why I like that one is because I'd like to introduce a new data structure, which you complain a bit, which is reduce. Have you heard about reduce? Yeah, reduce is probably my favorite JavaScript method to iterate over arrays. It's extremely powerful, and it will be vital when talking about recursion on the expert training. So, look at what we got. We got a string with words, characters, yeah? So we need to find how many capitals the string has. The first example, we only have 1 capital, yeah? As you can see here. We could use a regular expression, blah, blah, blah. To me, I'll tell you something. When someone solves this question using a regex, I'm sure 99% of the time that they just copy and paste it from Stack Overflow, right? And I'm not a big fan of copying code from external sources because if there is any problem, we won't be able to maintain that code because it's a black box. We just copy and paste it. So please try to avoid copy and paste from the internet. Yes, try to create the code by yourself. So I like to, we got 9 minutes, 10 minutes. How many arguments do we receive? 1, correct. I call that argument sentence, if you like. Sentence, yeah? So on this sentence, I like to access each individual characters. So first of all, sentence. How do we access individual characters? Split what? Single quotes, empty string, correct. So that will return an array of J, then Q, then U, then E, individual characters, right? So then, once I got that, I want to check for each character if it's capital or not. The reason why I would like to use reduce, and unfortunately I think I'll run out of time, is because with reduce, we can pass as the first argument what we call the accumulator. The accumulator is a variable that will host some data. I'll rename it. I don't like the word accumulator. This is just for academic purposes. The second argument is each individual character on that list. So I'll call it car. Yeah? We got more arguments, but for now, that's all we need. Then, and that's a new thing, reduce has another argument, which is the default value of the accumulator. So the accumulator in reality wants to determine how many capitals do we have. It's a number, right? So I'll rename it to total. And what should be the default value of total? 0, that's correct. We want to add 0, then it will be 1, then it will be 2. But the default total, if you want to count, if you want to get a number, will be 0, right? And then here, return. Whatever we return here will be passed to the next iteration. In other words, how do we check if character is a capital or not?
Should we compare it with the capital?
Compared to what?
The capital version of the
And how do we check the capital version, Abdul?
to uppercase.
That's fantastic, Abdul. Yes, you are right. To uppercase. So, do you remember the ternary operator? The question mark and the colon? It's part of the beginner JavaScript training, right? So, what I want to say is, A, if the character is the same as the capital, then what? I want to increase the counter, the total. So I want to do total, return total plus 1. Else, what? We'll always go to the next iteration. Do we want to change the total? If the first character is E, lower E, no, so then keep the total as it was. Yeah, that's the syntax. Also, we should ignore the spaces, right? Because a space is not considered a capital or not capital, right? So how do we can change that structure, that if condition, saying if character is not a space and with double ampersand, you see the idea, right? So if character is not a space and is capital, then increase the counter. If not, just leave it as it was. So let's do something that we'll be doing every single time, or the majority of the times we play with reduce. And I massively recommend you to do the same, to add some comments, trying to figure out on each iteration what's the value of total and what's the value of character. So let's put an example. Hi world, something like that, right? How many times? 5 minutes. Come on, let's do that. So on the first iteration, this is our string. This is an example. Iteration number 1. What's the value of total? 0. That's correct, because that's the default value. What's the value of character? 8. That's correct. What do we return? That's correct, because 8 doesn't satisfy, lower 8 doesn't satisfy the condition. Just return whatever the total was, 0. Iteration number 2. What's the value of total? Still 0, right? We haven't changed it. What's the value of character? I. Return? 0, correct. Iteration number 3. Total? 0. Character? Space, correct. Return? Still 0, right? Iteration number 4. Total? Wrong. Still 0, guys. Still 0, right? Still here. Still 0. Character? Capital W. Ooh, interesting. Return what? Ah, you see the idea, right? Iteration number 5. Total? 1, correct. O. And so on, right? We are not going to change it. There is no additional capitals. Yeah, so to me, that's the best way to learn reduce. Once you learn reduce, every single program in JavaScript got much simpler. So, well, first let's see if that works, right? Or we are talking about bullshit. So, let's run it. It does work, right? It does work. Reduce, very important, very important. Also, FYI, there is a dark sibling, a dark brother of reduce called reduce right that no one uses. But that's the same thing, but it iterates from the right to the left instead of from the left to the right. It could make sense in some cases, but 99% of the time, you don't care, right? So that's the way reduce works. Question number 5, which we are not going to review because we run out of time, can be easily solved following the same pattern. So I'll strongly recommend you to play around with it and to play around with reduce. Any questions? Yeah?
This is a bit going off topic, but you know how you said that there was reduce right?
Yeah.
Don't you just do dot reverse and then dot reduce?
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. You can do dot reverse and then dot, yeah, fine. So to me, reduce right only makes sense if you have a list of elements and you want to stop once you find something, the first one, or if it's the first one on the left with reduce, it's simple. But if it's the last one, then it's easier to use reduce right because you attack the array from the end. So as soon as you find it, you stop, right? But again, you're right. You can do reverse and then reduce. So no big difference. Anything else, guys? No? All right. So let me check your code quickly. Question number 4. Here, sorry, yeah. Right. So, Vincent. So, look at, I like the approach, I don't like the style. So the approach is, I like it because look at what he does. He transformed the sentence into, sorry, let me submit that. Yeah. So he transformed the string into an array, and then he only keeps the capitals. So he has an array with capitals, and so he only has the capitals because he's removing, essentially, the non-capitals and the non-spaces. So, and the spaces, right? Look at the condition. What I don't like is the readability, because look, so you could have moved that to a new line. Yeah, it's a bit hard to read. I'm sure you get an elegance penalty here, because that should go on the right-hand side. Yeah, so here you can move these things to a new line, add a return statement, all these things. But yeah, apart from that styling issue, I think the idea is fantastic. It's really elegant. And then, because he has an array with capitals, he can simply return the length. Very clever. I like it. And then Richard probably got an elegance issue here because that line is too long. Maybe. Not sure. But apart from that, it's pretty much the same. Filter. Keep only the capital characters, and then return the length. The only thing I should suggest here, Richard, is to move the dot length here to a new line. Especially on the expert, you'll see that you have to operate many times with arrays. Dot filter, dot find, dot reduce, dot array, dot blah, 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 blah. It's good to have them all in separate lines. Helps to read the sequence of the actions, right? Cool. You see a nice try to use regex, which is a good idea, it's a good strategy, yeah, but yeah, it didn't work. And and it didn't work because essentially, so you transform your sentence into an array, but essentially match, it works with the strings, right? So you combine a couple of things. But apart from that, I think it may work without doing that. Let me quickly try it because that's an alternative. I pressed somewhere, sorry. That's an alternative approach. And that could be interesting. Again, it's really good to try things following patterns you don't feel comfortable, right? You'll eventually become a better developer. So this is what Anais proposed today. So that won't work, right? Let's try it. It doesn't work. Look at the problem. Character of the match is not a function because match works with strings. So if we pass a string, let's see. It works. So it was even simpler. Yeah? That's an interesting approach. Using match, you create an array only with capitals, and then you return the length. Simpler, right? Yeah, of course. We can even simplify that. Look, how sexy. One line, right? It's fun when you struggle with a problem, especially on expert. You write 20 lines of code, 45 minutes sweating like a pig, and then on the review you realize someone did that, right? But anyway, it's good, right? You see how to do it, so yeah, I like it. Anything else, guys? No? Cool, so that was it for now. See you in 65 minutes with the import and export. You were right, I was looking at the wrong week.